since this crisis started in March? I think it's once. And it was just to get an update. We're not engaged. And that's because the governor has taken this unilateral lawmaking authority on his own and is not involving the rest of us in this building, which is the voice of the people. We need to bring forward your stories and your opinions from our districts and sit in a committee and debate the pros and cons of all of these policies. And we're not doing that because the governor refuses to engage with the legislature on discussing what should happen during this crisis. Whenever we have a crisis or an emergency or unprecedented times like you hear a lot now, it's a time for government to grow. It's a time for government to then start making decisions for people and how you live your lives versus going back to the people and saying, this may not be the proper role of government to tell you how to live your lives. You know, government can provide research and recommendations and sometimes funding or, you know, they can provide money for personal protective equipment. But to actually lock down all the nursing homes by the decision of one person and his administration is wrong. My two daughters have a great-grandmother that's 99 years old in a nursing home just down the road from us where we live in southern Minnesota. And Edna was diagnosed with COVID in August. As a lot of people in the state have been diagnosed, whether it was accurate or not, we'll never know. But she has macular degeneration, so she's blind. She has hearing aids. She's very hard of hearing, and she's been living in the nursing home for some time, but knows everything in the room by touch and where it's at. And when she was diagnosed with COVID, she was put into a different room where she without her stuff, and was in complete isolation for many weeks. And it was, we had one visit through a window where we could actually try to talk to her through a window, but she couldn't hear us and she couldn't see us and she kept fidgeting with her mask. It was so frustrating to see that. The same care given. It was, you know, the staff, we enjoy them. They do a great job. They do everything they can, but there's so many restrictions put on them. And in a normal year, when we have seasonal influenza that comes through the community, the nursing home does lock down for a week or 2 weeks to protect the residents. But then it opens up again. I think 2 weeks is probably the maximum amount of time that you can actually isolate somebody without having to go through, you know, without their decline in mental health and physical health with it. This past 7 months have been brutal on so many seniors, and we need to change the policy. But as policymakers, Representative Lucero and I and Senator Housley can work to put in policies that involve your voices in those decisions. And that's the proper role of government, to bring your voice forward and your stories, and then hopefully to have the government not make mandates, but maybe recommendations, and allow each individual community to make decisions on their own, involving your voices on how you want to take care of your loved ones in these facilities. That's very frustrating. And there were some questions about ending the peacetime emergency earlier. The House, we would love to take back a majority in the House for Republicans so we can end the peacetime emergency. But the law that gives the governor that authority was so poorly written. Even if we end it, the governor can just reissue it the next day, and we can't vote on it for 30 days. That's how poor that law was written. And it goes against our Constitution, because our state Constitution prohibits the delegation of authority from one branch of government to another. So the legislature should never have been able to just give up its authority to the governor to write laws unilaterally. So it's also the legislature's fault for writing such poor legislation, and of course it violates the non-delegation doctrine. It also violates it makes the legislature basically veto the governor's provisions. The governor shouldn't be the one writing law and then the legislature vetoed. It should go the other way around. And the U.S. Supreme Court has multiple times upheld that legislative veto is unconstitutional. And so we have some really, we're in a constitutional crisis in the state. But I fear that government is growing every time it starts to make these decisions for us. And we need to take our freedoms back. And if you talk to a lot of residents in these communities, they just want to live their lives. And they understand mortality, and they understand that people don't go to nursing homes to live for decades. Most of them, they go there to get the best care they can, but it involves being with their families. And that's what's so important, is that that our loved ones are surrounded by friends and family. That's part of their care, and it's so critical that we go in there and help them get the care they need, check on them mentally, and we just don't have that with these lockdown orders. So I hope we can work hard to change those, and involve the legislature and involve your voices with your representatives and your senators in this building to bring this forward. This fencing that's around this Capitol is very reminiscent of what we're doing with the long-term care facilities. Yeah. This is your house. Yeah. It's 70 degrees inside there right now. Yeah. And we should be in there. Instead, we're out here, and many of us are going to get sick tomorrow and stuffed up because we were standing out here in the cold. But
and then you won't be able to go to work.
Yeah, we won't be able to go to work. That's right. So we need to rise up and take back our state and take back our freedoms. I always say that people get involved in government when government gets involved in your lives. And many people that were not political or not politically active, and maybe not partisan, they were independent voters, they've been touched by government in a very bad way this year. And I hope that people do get involved in politics now and do understand which one of your candidates running supports freedom and supports individual accountability and individual responsibility, as opposed to mandating how people live their lives. So talk to your candidates, find out which one of them supports freedom, and get out there and vote, and talk to your friends and family, share your stories, talk to them about what the solution is. This is a really tough solution on do we lock people down and protect them so the rest of us can live our lives, or do we involve the family and stuff? And it's a very sensitive topic, and it's not clear on how we should move forward, other than, I believe, personal accountability and personal responsibility should play a role in that, and we should be making decisions locally and not statewide. So thank you so much for coming out today, and thank you for organizing this event. I wish we had more people here who would come out in the cold, but we need to get control of our house here and end the governor's peacetime emergency powers once and for all, and change the underlying law.
Yes.
The question.
Yes. They were putting people with COVID in the nursing homes. Are they still doing that now here in Minnesota?
Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we aren't meeting as a committee anymore. We don't get updates like that. But that's certainly a question that we have, is what to do with patients that are discharged from the hospital if they've tested positive, or they, many times the hospitals will discharge a patient because they refuse to go on a ventilator, and so they think that there may be not treatment, and they want to put them in hospice. And then, is a hospital the best setting for them? I would argue yes. Or we could designate one facility just for COVID patients who are on hospice. But that's Bethesda's still doing that.
They're doing.
Yeah. So that is we need to figure that out and make sure we're making the right decisions from a policy perspective. As we do need to protect other hospital workers too. And there's so many people. And a speaker earlier mentioned about care that they're not seeking. How many cancer screenings didn't occur because people were afraid of COVID, and now they have stage 4 cancer that's irreversible.
Sir,
Yeah.
could you repeat the question?
Oh, the question is, are we still discharging COVID positive patients into nursing homes? I think the answer is yes. It might be different than before, but it's still happening. Yeah.
I've felt this way for many months now, and I've communicated this to some of the senators, state senators, that the only leverage that the Republican Party has had was in the Senate, and I felt that the bonding bill was the only leverage that they had to hold over the government to get him to grant this insane lock his power. So why in the world did the Republican Party in the Senate vote with only 3 senators? All the rest of them voted in favor of the bonding bill.
Yeah.
There's no more leverage. It's a total surrender. I don't understand that. Can you explain that?
I mean, Representative Lucero and I voted against the bonding bill, and for different reasons. I don't think that we should hold up the bonding bill as a negotiating tactic for the emergency powers, because as soon as the governor signs it into law, he can reissue his powers.
That's right.
I felt that was poor tactic to negotiate that way. This for me, this was about the fiscal health of the state. We have a $5 billion deficit that we have to balance. Unlike the federal government that can print money, we have to actually balance our budget in the next 8 months. And that means enormous cuts to human services and education and transportation. And the only way that we can make those cuts is if we actually get together and do a supplemental budget bill to change spending, cut programs, which no one likes to do. but we have to cut down to the bone to make the government so efficient, or more efficient in what we do, so we can balance our budget, which is constitutionally required. Only after that should we talk about spending another $100 million for the first minimum payment due on a multi-billion-dollar credit card that we take out to go buy, some essential projects, but then a lot of waste, like, money for Google, amphitheaters, all this kind of stuff. That was non-essential, but it's a campaign year.
A failing
people
state
felt that
zoo.
They needed this for their districts in order to get elected. I'm not going to criticize people that voted for it. I mean, we have a tough election this year, but for me, for my constituents, they don't want to raise taxes, and the only way to not balance the budget, without cutting everything, is going to be to raise taxes, and people are already paying too much money. The $5 billion shortfall, and I don't want to get into the budget too much here, but the $5 billion shortfall is because we don't have enough tax revenue coming in for the state. And what do we tax? We tax income. So average 5 or 6% tax in Minnesota for income tax. That means $100 billion in income has been taken from Minnesotans because we put the boot of government on the economy and haven't let up. That's the reality. So we need to fix that problem. But I fear, I'm on the Health and Human Services Finance Committee and on the Healthcare Subcommittee, and we fund healthcare for vulnerable Minnesotans, and it's going to be very difficult to make cuts out of that, outside of the small percentage of fraud and abuse and waste in government. And so that's the real problem I face. We need to focus on taking care of the people that need it most, and stop the programs that are wasteful.
That's right.
And one quick question, it's kind of related, but I think that it all ties together. What they've done is use fear. This is all fear-driven, right? Fear and using information that's not really factual. They've distorted information to scare us. And you see that, and I think Facebook has become, it's incredible the information that they stop, that they won't let people share, and then the information that is shared. And we have really no media in Minnesota, no local media. Alpha News, a little few there. If you're not conservative, you don't read that.
Mill City.
I can't believe even with the riots, how many people I know who literally didn't
I got a
even
channel.
know that buildings were burned. They didn't even
Minnesota
know.
Black Robe Regiment.
Well, I mean, this isn't really a partisan event.
You'll
and
hear I'm speaking.
People on both sides of the aisle have loved ones that are hurt, and so we really need to focus on making sure that we're talking about the truth, and allowing the truth to be heard. And science evolves on this disease. We know a lot more now than we knew before. The World Health Organization now says that the lockdowns don't work. They hurt people more. We've had a lot of information about how historically a 1% increase in unemployment leads to 40,000 more deaths in the United States because of alcoholism, drug abuse, domestic violence, suicide, depression, all of this stuff. We've known those facts. But you're right, there's a lot of people that don't want to talk about the hard facts, and unfortunately this has become so political, and people getting caught in the mix of that. But I want to turn the microphone over. I know it's cold and people want to get going, but thank you so much for coming out and share. Please continue to share your message, and don't let the election mute your voices, because we need to change things quickly, especially in the cold.